starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
And how do persons prepare for this time of great reflection? And what is it, joy to the world? The Lord has come. And speaking of light, and that whole idea where everyone is now looking up for the star of David, the star of David, the star that guided the three kings in that version of our history where they came to the illuminated light, the Christed one. And I say these things as I'm looking forward to what are some of the ways in which we're going to be bringing some of the knowledge systems that we're bringing together and highlighting. A greeting, Sister Queen Shanette Johnson. It's always a joy and privilege to have you join and tune in. And I pray that some of the information is useful for those that may already know, share it with others that are not as informed. And for those that already desire to perceive things in this one dimensional form, I'm going to ask you to just bear with me, be a little more humble, and tune into another dimension of some of the things that will be shared. And I'm going to start with a particular piece that comes from a publication that most people may not be that familiar with. It's called Paul Pecouvet, and it's the words, sounds, and poems of Yvonne Benjamin, one of the founders of the Midnight Band, coming out of St. Croix, Virgin Islands, representing the Caribbean, the Americas, and the world. When he wrote this, this was back in, this was copywritten in 2005. From that time, Brother Benjamin moved into being known as formally as Akabeka. And I think, profound, left the earth plane all too soon, not quite, just on the eve of 50 years, and brought so much through the music, using reggae as a tool, not just as a weapon in fighting, but as a weapon for healing and a weapon for growth and edification. And so this publication, which I'm not sure that my blurred background will let you see, but Paul Pegude, right? I think it's a classic piece. It's a collection of his spoken word and some of the illustrations that support the energy of our people. And I think it's important that there was a particular piece I was going to read, but then I shifted from that. But strong for goodness sake, this is one example I'm going to pull from. The fear above my heart slowly trickled into my bloodstream, pumped to all areas of my being, cruel existential injection, progress suspension, African, know thyself. But I do so where to, with a foot too big for the shoe, foot on fire, shoelace with wire, I squeezed my width into the depth of a pit of hangers on that slow me crime and punishment. Oh, to destroy consequence. Change is my daylight reward for think, strain, and fight by night prerequisites. Seldom fit a developing course. So from scratching with force, the least and the most wide awake, strong, for goodness sake. And again, this is the work of Akabeka in one of his publications entitled, let's get that name right, Full Ekude. I think I can get almost the whole piece so you can see. Okay, we're going to get there. We're doing blurs for a reason. And the idea here is that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to use poetry, prose, various persons' literary celebrations. I'm going to keep putting a couple things, Sargasso Sea Scrolls, and this is again a collection of poetry by the Honorable Scholar, originally from Africa, Dr. Donovan Cuabon, who is a professor at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, and provides his work. This is one of his current works, Sargasso Sea Scrolls. And I'm really grateful that he shared it with me, and I'm looking forward to its submission of I'm invited to prepare a review for the Caribbean Writer, one of the stellar publications that comes out of the University of the Virgin Islands through the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, that I will get an opportunity to offer a review of this phenomenal, almost like enchanting collection of poetic verse. And I think it's powerful because he dedicated this particular work into the loving memory of his late uncle, the Most Reverend Gregory Yebodon Pierre Baye, who became an ancestor in 2022, born in 1933. And he was the Archbishop Emeritus of Tamale in Ghana. And I just think it's important that persons get a chance. I like holding books, unlike some people that just like to scroll or listen to them. I like holding books. I like how they feel. I think I am two steps off of being a bibliophile or just a hoarder of publications. I'm the person that will go to the library when they're tossing out of circulation or no longer useful, so called. I don't think anything that's published is just unuseful. But I'm the one that would go and collect some of those publications because I know that it's important to expand your knowledge. It enhances your ability to be wise and not just a book learner. So I'm going to use the piece that he shared that's around maroon sirens. And his pieces are pretty powerful. And I'm going to do this one and then Heavy Metal Growth at Negro Hills. So I would like to make sure I share Maroon Sirens. Here, evenings reveal stone diaries, Thorn bushes fortify savannas, yet waves whitewash my bones on ever receding corals. As maroon flutes pierce the air, recall Umbula, sirens of Nakon. Men on rooftops let fly our arrows, scare away those hungry to sell under the baobab at Salaga, under this baobab at Baga, and here, under this 800-year-old kapok at Barber. Guide my hairs of our regrets, untie me from hardened hearts, guide me through hollowed crooked trees and rocky moss smooth gateways to fantasy forests, where am awaited my flesh sprawls at Bolu, or it is it Ulu again. And that is Maroon Sirens, a piece written by Dr. Donovan Kuabon in his recent, well, 2024 collection and publication entitled Sargasso Sea Scrolls. It's a beautiful anthology of poetry. And I just would like for the persons in the back of the room, not to make this a class session, but just there was a couple of terms that were used that he has notations for here. And he mentioned rumbula or bumbula. It's a short flute, was used to draw attention to the presence of slave raiders and to rally men to fight in the town of Nakom, upper eastern region of Ghana. I think it's important to know these things and what were the tools, how did our ancestors communicate and engage and prepare so that persons do not continue with that uh, mythical element that there were people that actually wanted to transfer, sell, purchase humans for chattel enslavement. That's not the end of humanity. Huh? The other term that was referenced in here was the name of some of these towns, like Nakom, a Gonja town in the Savannah region of Ghana, where a famous slave market was erected to sell captives from as far away as Mali to Ashanti slave merchants. Hmm. So, see, there's a lot of history and knowledge behind the words inside of the poetic verse, which is why I like holding the book, turning the pages, feeling the paper, not just scroll, 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 or just only listening to it. The other piece that's here, a well known Kasina town in the Upper East region, that's Salaga, in the Upper East region at the Ghana border with Burkina Faso, with a slave market in the 19th century. And then they speak of one of the in Barbara, it's one of the oldest trees in Curacao at Baber, right? And I just think it's really important to know. We have these trees, we've got these old centuries old trees dotted throughout the Caribbean, and sometimes we actually forget that we have them in our midst and just walk by without any reverence, any memory, without even a moment of pause and reflection of who and how many have walked by, climbed, leaned on, sheltered themselves under during the rain. These trees. Mm, marvelous thought. And then he makes a reference again to different places in Curacao. Obviously, these are places that have influenced his work, his literary work throughout the Caribbean space. And then the towns like Wolu is the towns in Upper West region of Ghana, where the people erected border walls against slave raiders and successfully resisted the Zambahrama and Mande slave raiders. And I think it's important to know that there's a lot more history that comes with this, just in terms of the great works that are presented herein. And I think like the one that really fascinated me, and I'm going to read this one, and this will be my last poetic piece from this collection. Salsa con Maria. For those that remember Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma dancing through the Caribbean and leaving devastation beyond measure in their wakes in 2017, just breathe. Salsa con Maria. I too would have loved to salsa with Maria, but was held captive by Irma's panic. So there I was chained ankle deep in a porcelain tub of water, filled to forestall a future. If this forced death dance of wind and water would burst these ancient PEX lines and leave me stranded with rumbling bells. So I stood, pinned to my baño window, desperate moth drawn to suicide beams, yet Maria steps up Irma's moves, whistled warrior songs, and danced flamencoed mahoganies to the concrete, flung plane trees to the ground. Slowly, all others are carried along the cry of drowned culebrons, in this flood without an arc of tomorrow. Me never see this kind water with jam with wind, mister. The signpost points downward and reads, mangled against resurrection in anger. Suddenly, at the crossroads to hope, a sniggering emperor, draped in despair, grins, squints, slam dunks. Bounty selects you. Wipe away your shocked tears. Stampede for Charmin Ultra. Now you stare at the dry toilet tank of hope. There are no more rainbows of faith. Only the whimper of a song scratches the windpipe, and you crumble in a pool of gurgling. And then the crash of falling trees, the flying glass, silence in a pool. And that is Salsa con Maria. Again, this is from the collection Sargasso Sea Scrolls, published and gifted to me. I think it's really cool. I get a kick out of this. Of the appreciation is shared by Dr. Donna Bancua, as I said earlier, a professor at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, and also a phenomenal author of poetry, anthologies, and collections, and reviews, and much more. There we go. We've had an opportunity to look at some things from the literary space. And as we speak, and you'll notice every once in a while my eyes go up a little bit, I'm hearing all of the executive security and military support service entities that are arriving from the air and to the shores of St. Croix, the cultural capital of the Virgin Islands of the United States, as the annual visitation of President Joe Biden during our Christmas festival season here in St. Croix has commenced, or shall I say, has continued. And things will be quite different as he visits family and friends and visits different parts of this relatively new National Heritage Area. Yes, St. Croix is a National Heritage Area. And maybe before I continue on, I should take a moment and share what is a National Heritage Area, because some people keep telling me, and I'm pausing right here because I think it's important that persons know it's not a national park, even though the purview and some of the parameters fall under the National Park Service, more specifically the Department of the Interior, which may change. However, I think it's important to know you can easily go to the nps.gov site and just in the subject area, in the search area rather, you can put in heritage areas and it will give you some information on national heritage areas. But I like to use this as a time to share some information. National heritage areas are places where historic, cultural, and natural resources combine to form cohesive, nationally important landscapes. Unlike national parks, national heritage areas are large, lived in landscapes. Consequently, national heritage area entities collaborate with communities to determine how to make heritage relevant to local interests and needs. In 1984, the first National Heritage Area, Illinois and Michigan Canal National Heritage Area was signed into law by President Ronald Reagan in his dedication speech. Reagan referred to national heritage areas as a new kind of national park that married heritage conservation, recreation, and economic development. Notice those three pieces: conservation, heritage conservation, recreation, and economic development. So it's not to say that the resources and the lands will never be developed. It's just to make sure that there is a cohesiveness between heritage conservation, recreation, and economic development. And then in January of 2023, President Biden signed the National Heritage Areas Act, PL 117 339, into law. And the law established the National Heritage Area System, a statutory framework for the National Park Service's role in its administration. And in 2023, 7 national heritage areas were designated, bringing the total in the United States to 62. Let me make sure I have that right. I believe 62. And what's amazing is that St. Croix National Heritage Area is listed. And I think that that's really powerful because while the feature photograph shows, it's very interesting, Christiansted in St. Croix, and kind of featured to the front is the actual National Park Service's Christiansted Heritage Site. That's a conversation that will bring to mind a wide variety because it is managed by our Virgin Islands State Historic Preservation Office, and it is also something that is connected to the multiple industries that are happening here in St. Croix and some of the sites of interest. And I realized the one that should have been at the top, but this is in alphabetical order, is the Maroon Ridge area that the people know as the Maroon Sanctuary Lands. And in light of what I just read in the poetic verse, those Maroons, that energy of persons of African ascent and ancestry that never accepted enslavement in any form and would run away even if it cost their lives or that of their family, their children, their loved ones. It's important to know that that area, that land, is being protected. So the historic sites of interest are listed here, and this will mean not that much to people that don't know St. Croix. So I'll just kind of focus on the Buck Island Reef National Monument, the Christiansted National Historic Site, the Christiansted National Historic District, the Estate Diamond Cruiser Rum Factory, the Estate Little Princess, the Nature Conservancy, Estate Mount Washington, Estate Wind Plantation Museum. We tend to just say Estate Wind Museum and delete plantation because we know most of these estates and the great houses were plantation sites. The Fort Frederick National Historic Landmark Site, the Frederiksted National Historic District, the Friedenthal Moravian Mission Site and other churches, Government House, the Green Key National Wildlife Refuge, the Lewetts Family Estate at Estate Leather Grange, of course, as I said, Maroon Ridge, the Salt River Bay National Historical Park and Ecological Preserve, Columbus Landing Site, even though Columbus didn't land there in 1493. He tried though, and the Taino women chased them away, left one survivor to go back and tell him, don't come back. Sandy Point National Wild Refuge, Southgate Coastal Reserve, St. Croix East End Marine Park, St. George Village Botanical Garden. They refer to it as the Estate St. George National Historic District. And then it speaks of notable people. And most people here won't say that the notable person is Christopher Columbus, just so we know that. But that's listed here, but also Queen Mary, the leader of the Great Fire Burn of 1878 in St. Croix, General Butto, and David Hamilton Jackson. Interesting that they lived in two different eras and impacted two different things, with General Butto being instrumental to the thrust for freedom and liberation in the mid 1800s, whereas David Hamilton Jackson, a labor leader, a judge, a lawyer, much more, was instrumental to the first newspaper, free newspaper, we should say, being started here, and also being instrumental to labor rights and principled governance here in the Virgin Islands. And that was in the late 1800s, early 1900s, like 1915 was around the time that they started the Liberty Paper. Alexander Hamilton, as quiet as it's kept, while being born in Nevis, another Caribbean island with mixed heritage. Let's be frank, Alexander Hamilton, really instrumental to the economic treasury system in the United States of America, was taught and tutored here in the Virgin Islands in his younger years by a Nigerian mathematician, just who was free. And I think it's important for people to know that. And his influence here in St. Croix, there's grounds where his mother was buried. We know where he lived. We know where he worked in different parts of St. Croix before, maturing and going off into the United States of America in its colonial era, in its early colonial era. Peter Benson, and then of course the NBA All-Star Ultra award-winning, phenomenal basketball player Tim Duncan, had his humble beginnings here in St. Croix. And so I share that so that persons can be on top of the game of knowing what is a national heritage area. Because sometimes when people say that, you just say NHA, people, even though you're saying NHA, totally different thing. They'll think that it's just another national park. And while we have national parks here in the Virgin Islands, the Virgin Islands National Park System in St. John, as well as Hassel Island right outside of St. Thomas proper, and then here in St. Croix, we've got three distinct spaces: Buck Island, Christiansted, historic site, and Salt River, as I've mentioned. There's a lot to learn, a lot to share, a lot to grow from. So we're looking forward to being able to share a little bit more to highlight a variety of comments and reflections and so forth. The other part that I think is really important that's been and I always like, I pull different literature to make sure that I'm not just speaking off the cuff. There is a book by one of our esteemed ancestresses. Her name, Eulalie C. Rivera. And not only did she live to be a centenarian, she was a phenomenal educator, cultural steward, what we refer to as the tradition bearer, and had this recollection of her Crucian girlhood. I love how she put it. Growing up on St. Croix, recollections of a Crucian girlhood. And it had some of the best love songs. I have my version that, okay, I guess they don't want you to see this right now, but it's fine. But mine is signed by her. It was really important to learn from such a great, not just a storyteller, but a griot, someone that could express from family line to family line to family line, and who was connected to who, and who came from which part of the earth. It was just amazing to listen to this elder woman's in her life space, and how she went from student to becoming a teacher, and then her love of teaching on the elementary level. And then, of course, all of her favorite hymnals are inside of her book. So she shared with us a little bit about, right, I want to use what they call Christmas second date as a part, and I had highlighted this before. At Christmas, we were free for 2 days, and only the most necessary chores had to be done. We had all our time for play, to enjoy our dolls and toys, work on arts and crafts, or do whatever we chose. Oh, those were beautiful days. On Christmas second day, some people know it as Boxing Day. In other vernaculars, it is the opening of Kwanzaa, the principle of Umoja. On Christmas second day, there was the masquerade or Mako Jumbi. We had a beautiful picket fence of a kind I have never seen since. I remember standing by the fence, looking out when one of the devil men came to the fence. I tried to run away, but my foot caught on a picket and he lashed at me with his whip. Before Sister Nanka's time, we were allowed to look at the masquerade through the picket fence. Not long after she came, she had it torn down and replaced with a wall. At those old masquerades, every masquerader had a whip, which was just a thin piece of stick ornately decorated. There would be such a lot of masqueraders going from street to street and stopping to perform their acts at the houses where people were gathered. The audience would throw their pennies or give them food. I am sure the masqueraders enjoyed themselves as much as the people they entertained, and thinking back on it now, I think the money they collected helped to pay for their costumes, some of which were quite elaborate. One member of the masquerade troupe was responsible for collecting the money, and no matter which masquerader picked up the money, it was always given to this designated person. Later, the money would be divided up among the musicians and members of the troupe. And I read that portion because she has a whole section in here on how Christmas festival, like its orientation, she was alive to see it before it was known as St. Croix Christmas Festival. How about that? And for the few years that they were trying to have a carnival, which doesn't necessarily happen around this time because our neighboring sister island of St. Thomas, after Lent, they have carnival, which is more in harmony with what is historically accurate and culturally correct. And so, with that, I'm going to go to my next little segment. And the other day, people were asking, what is the solstice? What does that mean? And how do we begin to have a conversation around the winter solstice and not make it seem like we're downgrading anyone else's time of celebration? And so, I always express to my viewers and my listeners that for those that desire to know, it's easy to find out. You just would like to make sure that you vet the information that is presented to you because we do have persons that will misrepresent our truths and persons that will overlook some of the things that we highlight. So I want to use a piece that's from some of the teachings of a still amongst us elder. Um, I knew him as Ray Strawn, coming out of Central America, coming into the U.S. As a young person, as a much younger person. And we know him as Shechem or Shechem. Some will say Ra Unefer Amen. And he has a very wide, extensive set of publications around ancient legacies, African traditions, and just ways that we can live in harmony and be able to extend a good, healthy, well balanced lifestyle. Some may remember him as one of the founders of, I should say, the continuum of the Asar Set Society. And with that, I'm going to just read this portion on the significance of December 25th in ancient traditions, as well as what takes place leading up from the 21st during the winter solstice. And I quote, at the midnight hour, on the very first minute of the 25th of December, the birth of the sun is commemorated. Beginning on the 21st, the period of sunlight in each day increased. Thus, the sun appeared to have been born again from the short periods of daylight in the preceding months. At this time, the sun was in the zodiacal sign of Capricorn, which was known as the stable. So the infant sun was said to have been born in a stable. Shining brightly on the meridian was Sirius, the star from the east, while rising in the east was Virgo, the Virgin, the line of the horizon passing through her center. To the right of Sirius was Orion, with three stars in his belt. These stars lie in a line and point toward Sirius, and in ancient times they were known as the Three Kings. Unquote. And again, that's from the work of Ra. Nefer Amen, Shechem Shechem. I think it's important that persons get a chance to hear more seriously some of the, and I'm sure you're hearing the jets that are flying over. Like I said, this is an ongoing commencement piece. I think it's also critical for persons to just have an idea. When we speak of the sun and the lighted one and illumination, and some will say Jesus, some will say Jesus, some say the chosen son, some will say Elishua. There's a number of names that are given to the Christed one, the Kerast, right? And it's a powerful teaching because, again, English is not our original language. So it's really important when we're looking at ancestral legacy materials, resources, scriptural texts, scrolls, papyri, etc., that we take our time to understand the idioms and the context and how they're written, when they were written, versus trying to make it seem like it was written today, only now, right? Because these are things that are millennia upon millennia old. So there's another part that's significant when we speak of the ancient Kemetic legacy or the Nile Valley, Happy Valley civilization legacy. And I quote again, in Egypt, Kemet, over 5,000 years ago, the birthday of the sun, as Ra, is celebrated in the temples on the 25th of December. It was the first day to lengthen most obviously after December 21st, the shortest day of the year, the day of the winter solstice. And just understand that people of Kemet, especially the ancestral Kemetu, not the ones with the decline that were busy worshiping outside of the infinite source and putting power and greed at the forefront of, having fabulous temples and so forth built for them at the cost of the lives of the people. But I'm talking about when there was still the restoration of humanity and that humanity was in balance and that there was Ma'at, truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony. That Ma'at, right? That was going on because it wasn't always in the decline. But Kemites have always believed in one supreme God, deity, infinite source, creator, most high, or rather an expression of divine life force. And that's stated in the book, Coming Forth from Darkness into Light. We know it as the Pertemru. The really messed up title that they use for that book, and you'll see why many people may not read this scriptural text that predates many other scriptural texts, and you can still find the teachings inscribed in stone, sometimes as deep as 8 inches in depth carvings, and that is the Egyptian Book of the Dead. See, if somebody calls a book anything the Book of the Dead, could be Egyptian, Assyrian, American for that matter, you're not really inclined or motivated to read that. When someone says coming forth by light in today, or this is a book on the divine principles of life, you'd be more motivated to read that. However, in the Pertim Room, it was revised 6,000 years ago. Notice what the term here is. It was revised, which means it existed more than 6,000 years ago because it was revised 6,000 years ago. And I just think it's important that the spirit of life from the Creator exists in all things. And therefore, we honor this manifestation of the Creator's life force, Ra, in the sun. So, see, that gives a different take on Christmas and a different take on illumination and a different take on how we look at the Kerast or the Christed principle in the one. Just as a just to provide some context so that sometimes when persons, I used to remember, I grew up in a household where we didn't deal with man-made obligatory religion. And so that way it looked a little different to many people. And I think it's important that there's also around this time, you have people doing like Karast observances from the winter solstice coming into the beginning of the new year. You have persons that are celebrating doing positive reinforcing work in our respective communities in a really beautiful, loving, engaging way. I think it's really important that people that don't know take a minute and learn some principles that will help you in the long run. Learn some elements of what I'm about to share around Kwanzaa. For those persons that are not familiar with KWANZAA, Kwanzaa. And Kwanzaa is a observance uh, series of holy days, and it's really important that persons are comfortable in how we bring all of this together, because people will think that Kwanzaa is a black Christmas, and that's not what it is at all. Christmas has a very different grounding and meaning, and it has grown to have different manifestations. So some people may not do the tree. Some people may not have a angel at the top of a tree. Some people don't do gifts until they are traumatized economically. Some persons don't know all the Christmas carols. And then some of us know all the Christmas carols and never celebrated Christmas. How about that? And just because of hearing it over and over again and the frequency. And then no one has a problem with joy to the world. The Lord has come. Let earth receive her king. Nobody has a problem with that. That's something that we should welcome, because we're talking about peace and prosperity and love and ultimately those other virtues, of respect and virtuousness and harmony. We're doing a lot of things that are supportive. And within the realm of Kwanzaa, as an African American and holiday. And I want to make sure I specify that there's a manifestation of Kwanzaa that is very grounded in what came forth in the 60s, coming out of the civil rights and the Black Power movements, and not just giving African children an alternative to Christmas, but authentically using it as a time for our young people and not so young people to have intergenerational engagements with our families, our brothers, and our sisters, and our communities. So I'm using a book here, Kwanzaa from Holiday to Everyday, a complete guide for making Kwanzaa part of your life by a new ancestress who didn't even, my Tefa Angaza. May she rise in power and be respected for the great work that she's given. And I speak of this because I think it's important that she went around the country and around the Americas, from Canada to the South America, reaching out to know, and also in Eurasia and certain parts of Africa, to find out where Kwanzaa celebrations were being hosted and held. I think it's really important that what she has done for us is provided a combination, if you will, of what Kwanzaa represents. So she speaks of these fundamentals, and I'm going to use it from two different sources. So, yes, it's an African American holiday. Yes, it is observed from December 26th to January 1st. And yes, there are specific principles for each day from the 26th to the 1st. And there are activities that are done each day. And the whole idea is to keep the community, keep our families, keep our individuals within our families, and those that are supportive of our societies, and support African upliftment and support African unity and self-determination. You see where we're going into the principles. So let me pause there. So there's 7 principles. They refer to them as the Nguzo Saba. And I encourage persons to look for the film, The Black Candle. The Black Candle is a up to date, well, it's actually dated now, but at the time it was produced in 1991. Oh, put me some wrong one. It was produced in 2008. I'm so glad that I'm catching myself, because I wanted to see if I could find the actual link for everybody to hear. But I think it's important to know that the young, well, not that young now, but M.K. Asante II, people were saying M.K. Asante Jr. back then, he produced a film called The Black Candle. And it's a wonderful film to give a comprehensive understanding of Kwanzaa and the way that it has been practiced or not in the Americas and the rest of the world. So I encourage persons to look for the Black Candle um, in the very near future. I know it's a dated film. I'm sure that there's others that are more current, but I feel that you can. I know that there's a version of the Black Candle on Vimeo. I believe that you can also get it through Amazon, and somebody may have it inside of the other platforms where you can view it. If you have an issue finding it, just email me at ozspeaks@gmail.com, and by that time I will have the link for you so that you can see, get a chance to see the full movie. I think it's important for people to get an idea of what Kwanzaa is, and right, because I'm pretty sure that you can see it on Amazon. Does have it available, but I know that there was another space that provide on YouTube. There, someone had the movie for free. I believe even what's it called, Plex is another option that you could use as well. But the Black Candle does a variety of things that may be useful for persons that want. It's a very engaging documentary that shows how Kwanzaa helps to celebrate the African American experience, and not just from a space of enslavement and colonization, but from a space of royalty and the regal humanitarian values that are integral to the African community globally, right? So I think it's really important that you can find that kind of information out. But in the meantime, in between time, while we go through Sister Angaza's publication, the seven principles of Kwanzaa, as I mentioned earlier, the Nguzo Saba. December 26th, day one, the principle is Umoja. In English, it's unity, to keep us so that we're dealing with unification within our communities, within our families, within ourselves, within our places of work, worship, and recreation, and that we're always focusing on to the best of our ability, family, community, nation, and our African ethnicity being celebrated and honored. Not watered down, not sanitized, but celebrated and honored. December 27th, day two, the Kwanzaa principle is Kuji Jagulia. I'll say that slower. Ku, Ji, Cha, Gu, Lia. Just like how it's spelled. Kuji Jagulia, right? And that in English is self determination. Just being able to decree and define ourselves, our names, our power, our businesses, our entrepreneurial elements for ourselves, speak for ourselves, share our own voice, tell our own truth, and do it unconditionally and unapologetically, and not with the vibration of antagonizing or harming anyone else, but just elevating ourselves to the point of positivity and the restoration of our humanity. December 28th, day three, the Kwanzaa principle is Ujima. Ujima means collective work and responsibility, which is self explanatory because we're talking about the maintenance and the sustainable building, not just building, but the sustainable, comprehensive, collective, cooperative, collaborative, I keep using those words, engagements that keeps our community together so that we can make our sisters and brothers affairs and problems ours in the space of helping one another, not in the space of criticizing and tearing down each other. No crabs in the barrel in the bucket for this one, right? So the whole idea is that we begin to solve things together. So here we go. December 29th, day four. The Kwanzaa principle is Ujama. Ujama means cooperative economics. We've already led ourselves into that one, building and maintaining and sustainably organizing and strengthening our own businesses, our own entrepreneurial efforts, whether it's a shop, a school, a not for profit organization, a philanthropic support system, all of that, so that we can profit from these things together. Day 5, December 30th. The Kwanzaa principle is Nia, purpose. We're making sure that our collective works and responsibilities and buildings and developments within our community restore our people to their sacred and sovereign spaces of authority and engagement that restore love, that restore harmony, that restore ma'at. Remember what ma'at is? Truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony. Ma'at, that ma'at. Day 6, December 31st. The Kwanzaa principle is Kuumba. And Kuumba in English, close translation, is creativity. And this is where we do all that we can in all the ways that we can to keep the creative force, the creative source, the creative engagements, the innovations at the center of the work that we're doing for self, family, community, nation, society, humanity, and the plant kingdom and the mineral kingdom and the animal kingdom. I'm going to say that. All of that is part of that creativity. Day 7, January. Did I get that part? I did it right. Yes, day 7, January 1st, is the principle, the Kwanzaa principle of Imani. And Imani is faith. And this is where people deal with their beliefs that's in their heart for their people and for the infinite source and for our parents and for our teachers and for our elders and all of the people and our leaders that are our leaders, not misleaders, not appointed misfits that claim to be leaders, but the leaders that authentically and with humanitarian flair and grace lead our people, them there. We're looking for righteousness and victory in our struggle. And faith, for some, is only tied to believing things. Authentic and grounded faith for others is knowing beyond belief, but knowing. So again, we've covered those in Guzo Saba, those from December 26th through January 1st. Those principles, day 1, Umoja, unity. Day 2, Kujichagulia, self-determination. Day 3, Ujima, collective work and responsibility. Day 4, Ujama, cooperative economics. Day 5, Nia, purpose. Day 6, Kaumba, creativity. And day 7, Imani, faith. And then knowing that in the midst of all of this, as we get ready to close, I pulled from yet another publication. I know this felt like it was a lesson plan, but no. I just figured that it would be important to give persons some resources that they can leave from this session and just check out on your own. You'll have a little bit of time while you're celebrating with family, friends, and loved ones to keep our focus and to keep our charge in my. So I'm using another publication, a pretty comprehensive one called The Spiritual Warriors Are Healers. The Spiritual Warriors Are Healers. And this is by Dr. Mfundishi Jehutimes Kaenheru Hassan Salim. Dr. Mfundishi. Mfundishi. If you just remember Dr. Mfundishi, you can Google him, Google Scholar, Snapchat, Instagram, X, Facebook, and you can find Dr. Mfundishi. And in his chapter, he has a whole chapter here on Kwanzaa, a re-Africanization ritual, which is very different point of departure than just making it look like a black Christmas and putting up red, black, and green and a kinara. And I want to make sure that people know a kinara, an African Kwanzaa kinara, is very different than a Jewish Hanukkah symbol. I think it's really important to remember that when we talk about that energy of the knowledge that comes with that and the prosperity that comes with that. So I'd like to just take a moment very quickly and share those I talked about in Guzo Saba, but I also would be remiss if I excluded the common values and practices that are connected to Kwanzaa as well. And in his book, he highlights, and in Dr. Mfundishi's work, he speaks of the harvesting, reverence, commemoration, recommitment, and celebration. So it's not like you just come together just to celebrate. It's like you're doing a report of everything you've done from December 26th last year to December 26th this year. And those are the people that are part of your celebration. Those are the people that you're doing your feast with. Those are the people that each day you're highlighting a particular principle of Kwanzaa that's shared. So in Umoja, we're going to do what were the things that we did together that supported unity through the year and celebrate that. On the second day, Kuji Jagalia, where we're honoring self determination, what are the things that we've been involved in collectively from last year to now to then celebrate and highlight, make it a reunion, if you will, to celebrate that. Okay. And you continue forward all the way to Imani faith on the seventh day. And usually on the seventh day is where the gifts, the Zawadi, usually handmade things, things that are grown in your yard, things that you crafted yourself, things that you've created and put together for yourself, creative baskets, foods, preparing food together, playing traditional games together. Those types of things are the Zawadi, the gifts. But again, it's harvesting, reverence, commemoration, recommitment, and celebration. And in the new year, we will spend some time, and perhaps on our special December 31st broadcast here with the Crew podcast as we close out the 2024 year and prepare for season 3 in 2025. It'll give people an opportunity to really know truth to power and to speak on what are you really going to resolve to do differently to improve not only the quality of your life, the quality of your family's life, but the quality of life in your community and the wider community that benefits humanity. Just putting it out there. It's been a joy and a privilege. I usually would have a guest, but I realized I had enough to share tonight. That anyone that would like any additional information or to have the references of some of the sources shared herein, they will be available on YouTube as well as Facebook, or you can just email me at astspeaks, that's ASTSPEAKS, at gmail.com. You can easily Google, look for Ask Speaks on Facebook and put a message there. And if there's a particular theme, topic, idea, concept that you would like to have highlighted as we resume in February 2025, let Queen Mother Dr. Chinzira know. Again, it's been a joy and a privilege to have you tune in with us on Oz Speaks. I love the energy of knowledge, power, and prosperity. It is always a blessing to be in the presence of viewers and listeners like you. There's a lot more to come, a lot more to share. I extend a special shout out to the African Queen Mothers Warriors of the world. And I give a special shout out to African Queen Mother Warrior Sister Dr. Sandra and African Queen Mother Warrior Sister Queen Esther for having a fabulous broadcast on December 21st, just highlighting the resurgence and the uplifting broadcast forthcoming starting January 19th for African Queen Mother Warriors. So again, if you'd like more information, stay in tune, keep an eye on. If you haven't subscribed to Oz Speaks on YouTube, please do so. Do the same thing for the Crew podcast. Look for Queens of Collaboration. Support all these entities. We have a number of broadcasters, podcasters that are amazing, amazing, and bring a content that is second to none. Remember, culture heals humanity. Land is our foundation. And spiritual harmony unifies us. So remember that you are a house of life. And in our vernacular, we say Per'Ankh, and we're looking forward to you tuning in with us in the very near future. And if I don't get to hear from you or see you in the new year, please know we're bringing a purpose in everything that we do. What's up? Good night. Blessing. Freedom. We need freedom. Oh, yes, I want freedom. I want freedom. Have a purpose in all you do. Just make sure that your purpose is true. Have a